I recognize the member from Regina Wall Shakers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise in the House once again on the second session of the 27th legislative sitting and talk about the speech from the throne, our plan going forward called Planning for Growth. Mr. Speaker, as always, when I stand here in the Legislative Assembly, I feel very humbled and honoured, and there's a few people I'd like to thank before I get going into my throne speech response. First and foremost, I want to thank my beautiful wife, who's up in the West Galleries of your Legislative Assembly. As the member from Martinsville said, she's as far away from me as she can possibly get, so that's nice of her. But Mr. Speaker, my wife has been with me for 3 years now, and it's been a short 3 years for me, but maybe a long 3 years for her. We've been through a campaign, we've been through building a house together, and she is my rock that I rely on, and our future looks better and better every day I get to wake up beside her, so thank her very much for being here. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wouldn't be able to stand in this House today and give my response to a throne speech without the good people of Regina Wall Shakers giving me their support in the election. It's almost a year from happened a year ago from November 7th. They humbled me with They humbled me with a 58% approval rating, basically, and I'm going to work hard each and every day to make sure that I'm representing them and how they feel our province should be going, and I feel that this throne speech is a part of that. And I'd like to actually talk a little bit about consultations. Our member from across the hall there from Saskatoon Centre talked about how we don't do consultations, and I know that I don't know how they made public policy back 16 years ago. It's probably a little different than we do it, but this document, the throne speech and our Saskatchewan Plan for Growth, they weren't forged at the cabinet table in Regina. They're assembled from ideas around every kitchen table across our province. Our 49 members went out and we asked the people of Saskatchewan where they want to see their province going in the next decade, Mr. Speaker. And the ideas that they brought forward and gave us are what you see in the Saskatchewan Growth Plan, Vision 2020 and beyond, and what you see in our throne speech. It's assembled from our 49 members going, talking to the constituents, consulting with our constituents, having ideas, and these ideas are what really filled the books in this little booklet, as the Leader of the Opposition would say. Mr. Speaker, talking about our throne speech, Mr. Speaker, there's some things we'd like to go through. We, as a province, are leading in economic growth throughout our country. Our province, our population is at a new record high, Mr. Speaker. That means from July 1st, 2012, over our last 5 years, our population is now at 1,079,958, Mr. Speaker. That's a growth of nearly 80,000 people in 5 years, and the fastest growth in our province in the last 90. Just to compare and contrast where our government is going and where the previous government has been, in July 1st, 1991 to July 1st, 2007, our population went from 1,002,713 to 1,171. That's a decrease, Mr. Speaker. I think that's perhaps why the opposition has some trouble understanding how we plan for growth when the only thing they ever did was mitigate decline.
That's right.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as always, we welcome some ideas from our members across the hall, but planning for growth is not one that they know very much about. And Mr. Speaker, we don't seek growth just for the sake of growth. It's not an end, it's a means to an end, Mr. Speaker. We look for growth so that we can invest in education, in post-secondary education, in highways, in healthcare. That's what growth means to us. It means an expansion in our tax base. It means an ability to provide people with the necessities they want to improve their quality of life all across Saskatchewan. So the question that we went and asked our constituents was, do we want this growth to continue? And Mr. Speaker, the answer that we heard when we consulted with them was a resounding yes. But Mr. Speaker, along with growth comes challenges arising from our growth, and we want to ensure the benefits are widely shared. And we heard that loud and clear from our constituents. And to that end, that's why we announced our plan for growth in our throne speech, Mr. Speaker. And the main goal for our plan for growth is to reach 1.2 million people by the year 2020. Mr. Speaker, with our growth plan, there's 6 components to it. The first component is infrastructure, and we've created SAS Builds, a new government organization to drive innovation in infrastructure, financing, and design. Deputy Speaker, our focus over the next 2 years will be on renewing roads, water systems, healthcare facilities, and schools. The second component of our plan, Mr. Speaker, is to keep the Saskatchewan economy competitive. Our government will lower business tax from 12% to 10% by 2015. Mr. Speaker, this fall we will introduce the Saskatchewan Employment Act, which will clearly outline the rights and responsibilities of employers, employees, and unions in the workplace. Mr. Speaker, the third component of the growth plan for Saskatchewan is fiscal responsibility. Mr. Speaker, all of our plans within this throne speech will be contained within a balanced budget, Mr. Speaker. That's fiscal probity, and that's something that we take serious. That's the brand of our government. Our government fulfills commitments, but we fulfill our commitments within a balanced budget. Mr. Speaker, the fourth component of the growth plan is education and training. Mr. Speaker, as a younger voice in our caucus, this is something that I feel very passionate about. Post-secondary education and secondary education. I think it's something where if you don't educate your children, you won't have much of a future in our province. And we take this very seriously. That's why we've already committed to the infrastructure of secondary education. We've fixed 50% of our schools already, Mr. Speaker. I remember growing up in a small town. We'd go to school, and our school, when it would rain, we'd have buckets catching water all over the school, Mr. Speaker. The roof is leaking, the wind would howl through the windows, and that's something that we're changing, Mr. Speaker. And our finance minister and our education minister are committed to good education facilities, and it's something that we're very proud of moving forward. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, our post-secondary institutions have received over $3.5 billion in the first 5 years of our government. And that's something we pride ourselves in. We've done a great job in making sure that post-secondary education is available to everyone. And we feel that as an institution, we've committed in this throne speech to add 300 more training spaces to SIAS, Mr. Speaker, so that we can meet that challenge of trying to make sure that we have the skilled workforce to continue to grow our province. Mr. Speaker, the fifth component of the plan is innovation. We will continue to support world leaders leading research in agriculture and energy. And Mr. Speaker, this government isn't afraid to make goals, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And some of the goals that we've made in agriculture is increasing crop production by 10 million tons by 2020 and increasing exports of agri-food products by 50% to $15 billion in 2020. Mr. Speaker, this is something that was long forgotten in a bygone era when the previous administration was in place. They forgot about our agriculture sector. They didn't keep their commitments. They didn't think that rural Saskatchewan was going to ever catch up. They didn't think rural Saskatchewan could grow, and they really just tried to leave us in the past. And growing up on a farm, I know that we had some tough years in the mid-90s and early 2000s, and I think the agriculture community in rural Saskatchewan really appreciates the effort that this government has made to ensure that they have the capacity to grow. And moving forward, we consider the agriculture sector as being one of our main areas where growth is going to help this province move forward. Mr. Speaker, the sixth component of the growth plan is strengthening Saskatchewan's role on the world stage. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our government will appoint a Premier's Advisory Committee on Asia as part of our strategy to double Saskatchewan's exports by 2020. Our government will work to develop new markets in Central and South America. And under the new Saskatchewan International Future Scholarships, 20 students a year will study business at an international institution with government support. Mr. Speaker, in return, these students, they will agree to live and work in Saskatchewan for 5 years after they graduate. That's what the new Saskatchewan really is about, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Having opportunities for our students after they've gone through their post-secondary education or training at SIAS or gone to regional colleges, they see that their future is right here in our province. And that's why a year ago or a couple years ago, we agreed to a $20,000 rebate for one of the most aggressive student retention programs in the country, and why we've added the Saskatchewan Advantage Scholarship of up to $2,000 for any high school graduate in Saskatchewan that gets trained at a post-secondary institution right here in our province. Mr. Speaker, our growth plan does include targets, and those targets include, by the end of 2014, no one will wait longer than 3 months for surgery. By 2017, no one will wait to receive emergency room care. And by 2020, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Saskatchewan will have the highest grade 12 graduation rate in the country. The Saskatchewan economy is being propelled by our natural resource wealth. There's been a lot of debate about what we should do with royalty revenues once the debt is paid off, Mr. Speaker. And don't take my word for paying off debt before we decide what we do with our royalty rates as being a good idea. There is some third-party quotes that I'd like to share with you about some of our future growth plans, and one of them is actually from, well, I'll read the quote first, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I agree with Premier Wall. That is a matter of accounting. It makes sense to pay off the existing provincial debt before creating a new savings fund. Mr. Speaker, that's from one of the leadership candidates of the NDP, Aaron Weir. And it's nice that he agrees with some good public policy, and he's really one of the only people that has started to put up public policy for the leadership race, and we look forward to seeing what the other candidates are going to say about this. Mr. Speaker, paying off debt just makes sense. Anytime you look at a family, a household income, you can look and see that paying off debt makes sense before you start saving money. So I don't know why anyone would think that paying off debt would be a bad thing, but I'd like to hear what our leadership candidates from Rosemont or Saskatoon Massey Place have to say about that. Mr. Speaker, but when the debt is paid off, and it will be paid off at some point in time, Premier Wall has asked the former University of Saskatchewan President Peter McKinnon to look at the question by leading the Saskatchewan Heritage Initiative. Professor McKinnon will develop and recommend options on what Saskatchewan should do with its resource revenues after we pay off the provincial debt. Mr. Speaker, after years of stagnation, Saskatchewan is growing. But we do need to do things right to sustain this growth, to deal with the challenges of growth so that our children and their children can build a good life right here in our province. And that's what our throne speech sets out this time, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It sets out how we can continue to maintain our growth and grow in a sustainable way and make sure that we don't forget about some of the infrastructure challenges that we will face during our term. Mr. Speaker, it's a plan that I think the people of Saskatchewan had a great deal of input into. I know that my constituents, I had a wonderful summer of going out and talking to constituents, and they did mention paying off the debt was very important to them. They did mention that we know that growth is a good thing. We want to increase our tax base. We want to make sure that more people are coming to Saskatchewan. And we want to ensure that people that have their education in Saskatchewan have opportunities to stay in our province. And Mr. Speaker, I agree with the fact that when we grow our tax base, when we grow our province, when more and more people want to move here, there are going to be challenges that we face. But these challenges are challenges of growth, and I think that growing our province is something very important. And when we continue to hit, and when we do hit that population of 1.2 million, I think it may be before 2020. I'm a little optimistic, call me an optimist, but I think we can do it. And Mr. Speaker, when we do it, it's going to be another example of how we met a goal and we set it. We made a goal of recruiting 800 nurses. We made that goal. We set it. We attained it. And I think another one of our brands that people are coming to realize is that we do what we say we're going to do. And Mr. Speaker, that's something that once you do it over and over again.
They said they do nothing and they did nothing.
When you do it over and over again, Mr. Speaker, I think it's something that when people learn to respect you. And it's something that when we go and door knock in 2016 when the next election comes up, and we say, you know what, this is our platform, we're going to roll this out, they're going to believe what we say. And for us as politicians to have people believe what we're going to say is important. And I think it's a great reward for us. And I believe that our Premier leads the way in making sure that we do what we say we're going to do. And our great caucus, our 49-member caucus, they're all people of great honor and integrity. And when they go forward and they tell people what we're going to do is what we're going to do, the provinces believe in us, and I think that's very important. So, Mr. Speaker, I will strongly disagree with the amendment put forward by the opposition leader, and I believe that the people of Saskatchewan see through that their need to strongly oppose us. But Mr. Speaker, I'll agree with the motion put forward by the member for Battleford, and I'll proudly stand behind this throne speech. Thank you.